Hey everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships with Nubicon. Today I'm going to talk about the New Orleans class cruiser at Tier 8. So firstly, let's talk about how it plays in-game, and later on I'll give you some information on what it was like in real life. Now, what's probably the biggest contention and biggest arguing point about the American cruiser line, and why people find it to be a bit, well, meh at times, is the gun performance. Now, the projectile themselves, the high explosive and armor piercing projectiles that come out of these guns, are actually pretty good in game. What people are mostly disliking about it is the fact that these shells fly a little bit slower than most other cruisers in the game. And here at Tier 8, so far, most of the other cruisers have a shell velocity that sits in that 900 meter per second bracket, while the New Orleans shells sit in the 800 meters per second bracket. And it's the lower end of that 800 meters per second bracket. I think it's 825 meters per second, but it might be a bit more. And it's this difference in speed or velocity of the shells that means that the shells have to have a much higher arc. And that of course makes the shells sort of linger longer in the air, make it a little bit harder to hit your targets, because simply it takes them a little longer to get there. And not a lot of players enjoy trying to adapt to this difference in velocity. Now, does that mean that the guns on this ship are bad? No, of course it doesn't. What it means is that these guns have to get a little bit closer to the target in order to be far more effective. And with that comes some pretty big risks. And a lot of players that play the game aren't really comfortable getting into the situations where these guns are going to work the best. But if you've made it to the New Orleans, you already know that most of the American cruisers in this line have the same kind of ideas behind them. You need to get in close with your guns, and you need to use your really good maneuverability to keep yourself alive. And that is the strength of the New Orleans class and pretty much the entire American cruiser line. These ships answer their helm really quickly, and they don't lose a lot of speed in the turn either. Unlike the Russian and German cruisers that take a little while to answer the helm and then slow down a fair bit when they're turning. This allows you to get closer so that you can get your guns into a range that are far more effective while still being able to outmaneuver the projectiles being fired by the battleships. And to help with this, the New Orleans turret traverse is slightly quicker than the other cruisers of this tier. And not only this, but the citadels on this ship are slightly smaller than most of the other cruisers at this tier as well, which makes them a bit harder to hit. Not impossible to hit, they can be hit quite easily, but still a little bit harder to hit than the other cruisers at this tier. And of course it makes it even harder to hit when this ship is being put through the kind of maneuvers you should be putting it through when you're trying to get close enough for the guns to be effective. Now, I mentioned the fact that this ship has higher shell arcs before, and this actually can help you when you're maneuvering around islands. Sometimes you'll get to a point where your shells are the only ones that are going to go over the top of the island, and the targets you're shooting at, their shells aren't going to come anywhere near you because they don't have the same kind of high arc. So this ship is quite capable of sitting behind an island untouched by the other cruisers on the enemy team and still being able to pepper them with fire from these 8-inch guns. And now it can't do that as well as a Cleveland can do, or as well as the Des Moines can do at Tier 10, but it does it reasonably well. But everything about this ship in the end tells you that this is a brawling ship, a ship that needs to get in close and use its guns. And I know I've repeated that about 5 or 6 times, but that's exactly what these ships are in the American cruiser line, and the armor on this ship is designed to help with that as well. Now, it's not going to protect you from battleship shells. There is no cruiser in this game that is protected from battleship shells, especially if you get in too close. That's why you have to rely on your maneuverability to not be hit by a battleship, because they will wreck any cruiser in this game at the moment. But the New Orleans armor is built to take on every other cruiser gun and every other destroyer gun in this game, especially if it's trying to fire AP rounds at you. High explosive, not so much, that wrecks everything in this game. And with this ship's turret traverse and the ability to get more guns on target at steeper angles than most of the other cruisers at this same tier, it means that this ship can brawl with other cruisers really well. And with the newly added radar consumable that you can now use on this ship. It means that you can spot destroyers from a little bit further away than you used to be able to, and it makes this ship a little bit more useful in certain situations. But the ship's guns don't really fire fast enough to be able to take on destroyers on your own, like some of the other faster firing cruisers can. So this cruiser isn't really a destroyer hunter, even though it can be used for that role. Mostly, this cruiser is good at taking out other cruisers, as well as using its AA to defend other ships in your team from enemy aircraft. But if you do find yourself in the situation where you are facing off against a battleship, hopefully there's an island or some other obstacle around you, so you can use the maneuverability of this ship to keep you out of the line of fire from the battleship, while still quickly moving out to fire yourself and then moving back in behind the object in order to get out of the line of fire of the battleship. And the speed of your turret's rotation will help you to keep these guns pointed at that battleship while you are performing those kinds of maneuvers. And so the life of an American cruiser player is much like the life of an American destroyer player, where you will need to take some really harsh risks in order to get your reward. And that can tend to lead to some pretty pulsating moments where your heart's racing like anything. Now the real question in the end is, should you even bother grinding out the entire US cruiser line, since most of them from tier 6 upwards are very similar? And pretty much my answer to that question is yes, you should play this cruiser line, even if it's only up to tier 8 or even all the way to tier 10, because it's going to teach you awareness. Because in order to stay alive in those situations where you have to get closer to get these guns to be effective, you're going to have to pay attention a lot more to what's around you and what's shooting at you. And in this game, awareness is the absolute key to being successful, as well as knowing when and if you need to get out of a situation, and when is the safest time to start turning your ship and facing your broadside onto an enemy ship while you're in the turn in order to get out of that situation. And all of that you will learn while you're playing these American cruisers. And that's going to help you when you play any ship in this game, except for maybe aircraft carriers, because they're a really different style of gameplay. Now how about the New Orleans class cruisers in real life? Now in this video I'm not going to focus on any of the particular New Orleans class cruisers. I'm just going to talk about the class in general. And this is because each one of these ships participated in the heaviest surface battles of the Pacific War, and a few of them, if not all of them, really do deserve their own video. And so, in real life, the New Orleans class was a set of 7 cruisers that were built under 3 different designs. And these 3 different designs were test beds for new innovations in cruiser design. Originally, the New Orleans class of cruiser was designated the Astoria class of cruiser. However, the Astoria was sunk, and the rest of the cruisers were heavily rebuilt after that. And so they were renamed the New Orleans class of cruiser. 3 of the New Orleans class ships, the Astoria, the New Orleans itself, and the Minneapolis, were all originally laid down as Portland class ships, but were reordered and rebuilt as New Orleans class ships. The New Orleans cruisers were classed as heavy cruisers, but there was nothing really that heavy about them when you come to look at their armor. The heavy cruiser designation comes from the fact that their guns were 8-inch guns. Each of the ships was 9,950 tons. They had a length of 588 feet 2 inches, which is 179.27 meters. They had a beam of 61 feet 9 inches, which is 18.82 meters, and they could run at 32.7 knots, which is about 60 kilometers an hour or 37.6 miles per hour. The main armament on these ships, as I said before, were 9 8-inch guns in 3 triple turrets. Its secondary guns were 8 5-inch dual-purpose guns, and was also fitted with 8 50 caliber machine guns. At the time of their completion, these were the armaments that these ships had, but after the attack by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor, the Americans realized that it would be the air power that would decide most of the war. And so they put an emphasis on getting a lot more anti-aircraft onto the guns onto these ships. And so as the war progressed, the armaments of these ships were increased, with the 20mm Oerlikons and the 40mm Bofors being fitted later on for anti-air purposes. These ships were also fitted with surface and air radar, which would become vital later on in the war, and each of these ships had approximately 708 officers and enlisted men on board. And so there you have it. Those are the basics of the New Orleans class in World of Warships and in real life. As you may have noticed, I've had to switch off the UI a fair bit in this game. Unfortunately, this is a 0.5.5 replay, and it's being recorded using the 0.5.5.1 game client, which means that the UI was stuffing up and it was getting all these little articles all over it, messing it up so you couldn't see, and the map was getting so screwed up. So I have switched off the UI a fair bit in this game that you're watching in the background. But anyway, the game's now coming to an end, so let's take a look at that post-game battle results screen. Now as you can see, we did pretty good in this game. 2 kills, 4 fires, 76 hits, 4 planes shut down, 10,077 experience, but that's of course with a lot of flags and the camo. You see we came first on the team, 1,919 base experience. We only did 50,000 damage, which is not a lot, but we must have damaged a fair few smaller ships and reduced their HP by a pretty big percentage. That's why we got that pretty big reward. So guys, leave me a comment, tell me what you like about the New Orleans, what you don't like about the New Orleans, what you think should be fixed on the ship, what do you think they should change in the game in general. Give this video a like, and of course don't forget to subscribe. And so enjoy whatever game you're playing, and I'll catch you guys all next time in World of Warships.